Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Jody Lynn, of course, I always look forward to doing the Wednesday shows with you, just because you're such a brilliant, insightful person and you make things fun. And I think we're going to have a little bit more of that going on today because we have a guest who she basically came to the conclusion that she should be able to do it all and have fun at the same time and make it easy for herself. So this is going to be,
I like that.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
This is, so let's bring her on. Mia Moran is, she's all about planning simple. That's the quickest way to describe what she does. And, I'm not even going to, try to explain that because I think she can probably explain it better than I can. So Mia, welcome to the program. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Glad to have you. Give us, the 1 to 2 minute biography and how you got to doing this simple planning thing.
Yeah. So, I'm a very creative mother of now 3 teenagers and entrepreneur always. And so that means that there's a lot going on in my head, in my heart at all times. And so I needed a simple way to actually keep moving forward and stay in that joy. And so that is how this all got created.
Okay. So maybe we start off with tips. Because there are lots of people who have lots of things going on and often it's hard to get everything in. You seem to have figured that part out. What can you tell people?
Yeah. So, I have a little bit of a different take on that. It's not about filling our calendars and our days full of all the things at all. In fact, I think probably one of the first things everyone should figure out how to find in their calendar is empty space versus something else to do. But that said, one of the reasons I became really passionate about planning was actually to do a lot with, what you talk about all the time about creating a great life is that, I found it was actually really hard to do that in the moment very often with all the things that I was balancing, trying to grow a business and be a good mom and have a home and take care of myself and all the different things. And I found myself in way more frustration than ease very often when I was, at the time, I just thought I was always supposed to be in the present moment and living mindfully. And I just found that very difficult in real life. And so for me, all planning is stepping back enough to actually get the downloads and see what it is that I want and then make space from that energy instead of getting all the shoulds and things I could do and things everyone else is doing and try to Jenga them into a calendar. It was really about the opposite.
Wow.
Yeah. I love that word Jengaing.
I just made that up, I think. But anyway.
It's very fitting though. That's what we try and do as humans, right? When you're really busy, you just try and jam more in. Where can I put more in? Okay.
Yeah.
Eat while walking on a treadmill. Yeah, great.
Well, and I think that a lot of us are trying to fit in everyone else's stuff, much more so than our own. So it's that's where all the shoulds are, right? It's this is the way this neighbor does it. So I must have to fit that in. And then this is the way all the other people in my field seem to do it. So I should fit all that in. And this is the way it looks like, so we put all these things in that aren't even ours. And then we wonder why it's so hard to actually get the results we want. And I think that once you step back, calm down a little and really tune into what's yours and make space for that, people start to see that it's oh my gosh, it's so much more easeful. This does not feel as hard. I'm not as stuck. And a lot of it's just to do with the fact that you're actually paying attention to what what's yours to do instead of what's everyone else's stuff to do.
Yeah, I like the fact that you include the should in there because we do have a tendency to should all over ourselves and everybody else at the same time. And that's probably the biggest time killer right there, isn't it? Just the shoulding.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we don't and the second we start getting into the energy of, not wanting to do whatever, there's a difference between something that you really want being hard or pushing your limit and something actually being something you really don't want to do. Like, we can rise to the occasion of, I don't know, building a business or finding the love of our life or whatever. Like, even though the steps aren't all easy, if we're aligned to them, we figure it out. But the other way, when it's everyone else's stuff, we often get stuck. So it looks on our calendars like we're really busy, but actually we're just spinning our wheels and getting lost. And,
Jody Lynn, this sounds a little familiar, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I talk about this a lot. It's so true. One of my favorite phrases is, when I try and force myself to do something with all of those shoulds, it's going to take me 10 times longer versus when I'm in that flow state and it's mine. I love how you described that. I can get more done in an hour than most people can in a week.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So true.
Yeah. But I find, Mia, that, for myself personally, I know there's a lot of other things that other people in my space have going on, but I find that I naturally am like, oh, I need to take on this and I need to take on that and I need to take on that. What do you recommend for that? Like, instead of taking on other people's stuff, like, oh, I got to help them do these things, especially as a mom. Like, I don't even have that yet.
So I feel like it's like a combo of things. So it's like really being conscious about when it's somebody else's and when it's yours. I think that's definitely step one. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I think that genuinely, especially if you're a super creative person wanting to calling in a lot of different things, sometimes it can all be ours. But then I think what's really in the other piece of planning is that, so we've developed this model that really brings in more feminine energy than I think one might normally think about planning. So I think it's really important to stop and get centered and really connect with your vision, with higher power, whatever you want to call it, and then decide. And then the next step is put it into time. So I think what often happens when we're the kind of person who gets all these ideas and they really genuinely feel like they're ours, is that our brain, our heart, our soul, none of those things understand time. So it very well might be true that it's all ours, but that download doesn't take into the account that we already have a full week and that have all these things that we're doing. And so after you've decided that this is something I definitely want to take on, one of the important steps in the process is to come back around and be like, okay, so I meant to go to Paris or I meant to write a book, but I don't have to do it next week. Yes, it's true that was a download, but I need to figure out how that actually works in the life that I'm doing. And, if it feels like it's important, then we can move it forward, but then we have to see what else needs to be moved out. So at some point we do have to look at, the real, if we're operating on our planet, we have to look at the time and how it works there and put things in time and understand them. And then I think that our system then our system calms down enough and can get out of that overwhelm again. So there's this piece of overwhelm that's about stuff that's not ours or stuff coming in too fast. And the not ours, we sort of have to get quiet and weed out. And then the stuff that really is ours, we have to understand in the constructs of the 24 hours that we have each day and, the years ahead is how I dealt with that. And then things move in their own timeline. Right. So I think that's the other thing, part of the reason, I'm always telling people, the reason to plan isn't so that you have every day mapped out for the next 5 years. It's so that you are calm enough that you can operate tomorrow knowing you can get these great things and then magic happens. But I think we have to get that structure to be able to navigate and then it changes and then we, map it again and so on and so forth.
Yeah. You're talking about a balance here. And I think a lot of it has to do with one's own personality. For myself, planning has never been difficult for me. Planning's always been easy. The hard part for me is to let go of the planning.
Yes.
So I have to kind of move in the other, and that's what I've worked on the last few years, moving in the other direction. Okay, where can I just let it go and let the universe do something? Because most of the time early on, I was like, okay, I got to work this one out and this one and this one, this one. And I would just go, and I would do it too. I would plan it. I'd drive myself nuts, but I would do it. I'd get the whole thing done. And
yeah, in the phase that I'm in, and so maybe it shifts in different phases of life for sure. But in the phase that I am in, what I find is that like the reason planning has to be involved for me, even in that situation, is I need to hold the space open to like allow that to happen, because if not, like something else comes in, right? Like things get scheduled, or like somebody needs me somewhere. And so then it's like, then I feel like I've then filled everything again with things that I'm not 100% in alignment with. So for me, sometimes planning looks like this whole day is just empty. And that's how I need it in order to like navigate the magic. But I need to like I need to hold that day open, or, you know, so I blame everybody else. But the truth is I might open Netflix and get lost in Netflix. And that wasn't really what my soul wanted to do that day.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm kind of in that realm for the first time, because I've managed to get to the point where my business pretty much runs itself, which is
that's cool.
That's a huge shift. I mean, 10 years ago, it was running me ragged, and, we're talking 60 to 80 hour weeks. And now I've got it down to a 5 to 10 hour week. So it's a
amazing
big shift in the other direction. And I'm kind of coming to terms with, okay, well, I do have all this time that I didn't have before. What do I want to do with it? It's new. It's a new thing. I hadn't really been there before, and I'm enjoying it. I'm still figuring it out. I haven't subscribed to Netflix, so I think I'm okay there for the moment.
One of my favorite things was I was once doing, I think she framed it as her last ever retreat. It was Pema Chodron, and she was going on like sabbatical or something. And, so it's like this whole like meditation retreat, and it felt very like, I don't know what. And in the middle of it, she admits that like, she's like, and if we don't get lost in Netflix, like I do all the time. And I'm thinking, Pema Chodron gets lost in Netflix? Like, how is that even possible? It's like, that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah. We're all human. It happens.
Exactly. Exactly.
Being human is also part of the experience. I mean, you're right. I mean, it wouldn't be any fun actually if we weren't human. Really, when you think about it, because humanity, that's, first of all, that's where all the contrast and polarity comes in.
I was about to say, we wouldn't have the contrast, which, whatever, sometimes makes it feel bad and sometimes makes it feel interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But
adventure.
It is. Yeah. And all I can think is, what if I did get it to the point where it was all predictable and all the same? I mean, you wouldn't be able to wake me up. I'm kidding.
Right.
I woke up at 8 o'clock, went back to sleep at 8:15. I was done for the day. I mean, that would be very well. That would actually end my life pretty quick, to be perfectly honest. What would be the point?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is about 180 degrees diametrically the opposite of what I would have said 10 years ago. That just shows how we develop and learn over time. So, okay, well, now I presume that because you're kind of like the simple plan guru, you probably get a lot of people picking your brain on it. What do you run into the most? What kinds of things do people when they're? And I know you mostly work with women, so let's frame it that way. When women approach you, what's the most common theme? This is the thing that they need working on the most.
So for a lot of women and who come to me, and I'm definitely skewed toward like, I don't know, 40 to 60 to 70-year-old women. Mm-hmm. So what happens a lot of the time is that, at some point it was like, and it could even be with your business story 10 years ago. It's like at some point it will be better, right? So at some point I'll feel okay in my body. At some point the kids won't be so busy. At some point the business will be grown and I'll have more money. And I tend to work with people who have all three of those issues. And then all of a sudden it's kind of clear that at some point doesn't just come. Like, it's not like all of a sudden everything is like, okay. And so one of the big things that happens in there is a genuine desire to take personal responsibility, but not necessarily knowing how to do that, because that's like literally not how any of our world operates. And also like a loss of dreaming. So almost like a loss of like, so a loss of really being attached to what even is the want. So like not even understanding, like sometimes people come and they're not even sure what they don't have because they're not even sure what they want, but they know something's missing, if that makes sense. So, and it's awful that we get to this point where, we've tended to all these other people for so long. We've tended to like dreams we thought we wanted, but weren't really ours. And all of a sudden we just come up blank. And as we know, that's makes it harder to get what we might actually want. Cause if we can't if we can't reach for that dream and that vision, it becomes harder.
Well,
so I feel like that's the biggest, yeah.
In my own case, I know that certainly there's that blank out, or there was that blank out for quite some time about what I wanted. And in my case, it was more about, I didn't dare ask for what I really wanted because I've been disappointed so many times. You get disappointed, you say, well, what's the point? I mean, you're talking to other people and you're saying, you're trying to say, oh yeah, I'm going for my goals and so forth. But deep down inside, you're saying, yeah, I'm not going to ever get this.
What did you do in that case? Now I'm going to ask you questions. I'm so curious.
Seriously, that was one of the main reasons I started this podcast, because I had reached a point. I started in September 2012. My business had crashed and burned in 2008, and I hadn't been able to resurrect it successfully. So by the time 2012 came around, we were in desperate straits. I was trying to figure out what was going wrong because I was doing what I'd been taught growing up. This is how you do it, and what I was taught wasn't working. I heard about law of attraction, and I couldn't even, coaching hadn't really become the big thing it is today. But even if he was a coach, I couldn't have hired him anyway. I didn't have any money to hire him with. So I was kind of stuck. So I started the podcast figuring, well, I'll just bring people on who are experts. They can teach me this stuff.
Yeah.
And they worked really, really well. But I mean, I was at my wit's end. If it wasn't for that answer, I don't know what I would have done. To be perfectly honest, I really just felt not just stuck. I felt like stuck in amber.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like such a good point that other people's visions, I guess, that are in alignment, because there can also be a lot of noise, is so like just seeing what's possible, I guess, is so helpful sometimes, especially when what's possible really resonates with you. And I relate to that because I've always been an entrepreneur, but my background is in graphic design. So my first company I owned a graphic design studio for, 13 or 14 years. And that was when I had my kids, and I had sort of a health crisis in the midst of all that. And so I ended up on this journey to just get healthier. And because I don't even think podcasts were a thing at the time, because this was probably like 15 years ago. So that wasn't even like what was happening. And blogs, WordPress, I was luckily a designer, so I could make a blog, but I did something very similar, which is I started reaching out to all these sort of health gurus. And I was like, I'll start a magazine because everything healthy looks really ugly. So I'll just make it pretty. So I started a magazine and I just started interviewing all these health people, but it really did show me health is more about what they're showing me in Vogue, and health, I don't need to be on medication, and wow, there's really something to this. So I totally see how that can be so helpful for everyone.
We actually have a double parallel going on there, because my business that crashed and burned was a web design business. And
really?
I had a graphic design background before that. I was doing web design for nonprofit organizations. And
how funny.
2008 wiped out all the nonprofit organizations I was working for. They were little small ones all over the country. And they literally went all out of business within about a month because of the financial crisis, which wiped me out of business. And it was terrifying. It was really terrifying.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh my gosh.
Interesting parallel right there.
Yeah, very interesting parallel.
I said, oh yeah, I know that one real well. Yeah, I could practically do WordPress in my sleep.
Well, that probably came in handy for this too, right?
Yeah. Interesting thing happened though, because along the same topic of what is it that you really want, that was a big part of what I was wrestling with, because I really didn't want to be doing that business.
Yeah.
I didn't love it. I was good at it, but I didn't love it.
Yeah.
And man, if you don't love it, it's amazing how quickly it not only crash and burn, which it did with the crisis,
Yeah.
but I couldn't resurrect it because it's not like I didn't try. I was trying really hard to resurrect it, but my heart wasn't there. And so I was constantly undermining myself without realizing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I really actually loved it and sort of happened into this other thing, like, but then this other thing started being like feeling so much more like my purpose. Whereas like I loved the visuals. I loved design. Like design school had been the first time that I had realized I had control over what I did because I had come from a very traditional school background. So then I ended up at art school and I was like, oh my God, like there's people who think like this and talk like this and like do these things. Like where have they been my whole life? And so I felt like I had entered this like world. So by the time I got healthy and was like, whoa, I have something to say about this. I felt like you weren't allowed to do two things that were meaningful in a life. I was like, who am I to go do something else when I already have this thing that's like working? Like, you can't do that. Like everyone says that once you find the thing, you're just supposed to stay with the thing. And so I sort of grappled with that for a long time, actually, of like not admitting that I wanted the second thing.
Yeah, I think everyone has a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they say, those people, they have lots to answer for too.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, the parallels between your guys' stories. For me, I found that I didn't realize that I was stuck in a life that everybody else wanted for me. I had no idea, and I was completely blindsided by it. And it happened because of a breakup. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get healthy and I got to take personal responsibility for this. I'm the common denominator. And so like hire a relationship coach, hire a fitness coach, and, doing all of these things. And, reflecting on it just recently, it's so interesting because when the breakup happened, we had planned to move to this bigger house, and it was like almost 3,000 square feet from a, like, I don't know, 800 square foot condo. So now I was all by myself in this giant house, and it was really reflective of what I had built in my life. It looked beautiful on the outside, but it was completely hollow on the inside. And that was a tough pill for me to swallow, because everybody around me kept saying like this, like, you're doing great. Like, you're doing awesome. You're at the top of your game. And like, this is the best of life. And it felt so empty.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, it's also miserable. It's interesting and miserable.
Yeah. Well, it shocked me. Like, I was like, what? This isn't what, because I kept waiting for, Mia, you had said it, like waiting for that day when there was more. Then I will be happy. I'll be comfortable in my body. I'll have a good relationship. Like one day. And I realized that I was never making space for that day to come. I just set my life up to chase it for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. On that day that I decided to get healthy, it was at a time when I had the 3 kids. They were all under 5. Call me crazy. They were all under 5. I had this design company. So I was at work in our office. We had about there's probably 8 people in the office at the time. And I just remember it was like 2:30 in the afternoon. And I looked across my desk and there was like 7 Starbucks mugs like stacked. And I just remember thinking like, okay, I've had all those today. Like that seems kind of expensive. And I've left the office that many times. So like, what have I gotten done? And also like they promised that Starbucks is infused with a lot of caffeine, and I'm really exhausted. And I was sort of like, and then I was sort of at this moment where I was like, but I had done all the boxes. Like, I had built a company. I had 3 beautiful kids. I'm still married and was married at the time to somebody I met in high school. Like I had checked all the things, and I was like, so why am I slightly miserable? And that's when like sort of the guilt came over me. But
2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah, 2:00 in the afternoon. No more coffee. But those moments allow you to really draw a line in the sand. And I think that's what's so important about them.
That's a really interesting point. Drawing that line in the sand. It's a way of expressing that at some point you just say to yourself, I've had enough.
Yeah.
Whatever this is, I've had enough of it.
Yeah. And I think you kind of have to. I mean, it doesn't always have to be like the huge thing. It could just be about water one morning, but like, I think you always have to do that to actually follow through and take action on things. You kind of have had to decide that the other way, the contrasting way, is enough.
Yeah, we kind of have to get pissed, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think there has to be some sort of boundary there. Or you'll just kind of like backslide. Oh, okay. You know, one of the things that I recognized for myself is I wanted this relationship, like a partner, a husband, and all of these things, kids and a family, but I never made time for that. Like, you know, reflecting on it further 6 years later, I could really see that I was like, you just follow me around like a little puppy dog. And that's exactly what I created in my life, which is not what I wanted. And I drew that line in the sand. No, this is important to me. Like, I want to have a family. I want to have that partner in my life. This is something that my heart is calling me to. And I used that boundary as like like something I could lean against almost throughout the next, you know, months or whatever, as I was redesigning my life. And when, you know, I met my now husband, Nate, you know, spending time with him while he was off for 2 weeks or whatever, right? Before, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have made that space. So I needed that boundary to lean on and be like, no, Jody, this is what you said you wanted. So either you're going to make space or you're going to go back to what you've already had. And it really helped me visualize making said space, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you also just said about knowing what you wanted in that moment, because like I've gone back and I sort of used that moment to dissect and create the method that we created around planning, just because how I did that is sort of how I did the next thing and how I did the next thing. And one of the things that I think is true is it's like, in those moments, you really understand what you don't want. And then you can really understand what you do want in a different way. And I feel a lot of times when we don't draw that like firm boundary, when we say what we want, it's not really what we want. It's really more, it's still more reflecting what we don't want than what we want, even though it sounds like something good, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to be in debt anymore. It's more like, that's more like attracting you back to the debt versus I really want to like buy this house or do this thing. Like, and I think we forget to like draw that line and go to that next step of what we really want.
Yeah.
Well, it's also a skill that we haven't developed. I mean, we can do this with almost any topic. Somebody is talking about something using negative terms. You ask them to flip it around and they draw a blank.
Yes.
Used to doing it.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I love to do it with people who are politically active because they're always against something, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So, you know, I'll talk to somebody, you know, okay, so I get it. You're against that. What do you want instead? Well, I want that. I want not that to happen. No. What do you want instead?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it's,
brain cells are like melting.
Yeah. It's funny because when my kids were little, they went to this, one of them still is there, but they went to this school that it was very cool in the sense that it was like building, it was more, I feel like it was more vision oriented. And then in high school, you know, you go into the system that we're in and everything is skewed negative. Like it's all fear based. So it's so interesting that like the same message can be delivered from that perspective. And people want to do totally different things. So I feel like, and the news is like that and the media is like that. So I think we're constantly being fed what we don't want. And so it makes sense that our thoughts sort of mirror that.
And honestly, I think that's probably why I'm not subscribed to Netflix.
Yep.
For the same reason I try not to watch the news or follow the politics too much or any of the other stuff. The weather, I mean, even the weather. Have you ever noticed that? The weather is all about hurricanes and tornadoes.
Yes.
You never have a special on how great the sunny day is. It just never comes up.
No.
Well, I think in Canada, we celebrate the sunny days more.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
On the news too?
Yeah, I think so. Like, it's like, yay, it's patio weather. We can go outside, break out the shorts. Everybody's talking about it if it's going to be like above 10 degrees. And right now we're having like a mini heat wave. I don't remember it ever being this hot in May, like early May, end of April.
Interesting.
So yeah, we're going to get a suntan here soon. Yeah. But it's only because, you know, for whatever, a very lengthy period of time, it's dark, cold Siberia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just shows how important that perspective is. What are you thinking about? What do you live in? Where's your attention? And when you're in a northern climate, your attention is, oh, it's cold again today. Yep. Cold again. Yep. Cold again. Cold again.
Cold tomorrow.
It's funny though, because I'm trying to think of like how to even derive meaning out of this, but I'm just thinking of this thought, so maybe you will. But so I'm from New Orleans, where we got the hurricane stuff all the time. But now I live in New England. I've lived here for a while, where it's cold. And one of the advice I got when I first moved here in the dead of winter, when I couldn't believe I lived here, was get outside. Just be outside. Like, don't be thinking about it inside. Don't be thinking about how bad it is. Like, be in it. And then it's funny because when you're in it, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's like,
cold.
And if you dress appropriately, like, and you can build a snowman or go sledding or whatever, like, but go on a walk. Like, it's just, it can be fun and joyful. Absolutely. But from inside, it seems dismal.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good reflection of a lot of things that we think in life, like drawing this boundary before you do it, or like sitting there and looking at it. You're like, oh gosh, it's you sitting in front of the window watching the snow fall, like panicking that you're going to die if you go outside. But it's not even that cold. It's not bad. There's joy there to be found.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm in Connecticut. I'm near Hartford. Where are you?
Outside of Boston. So it goes like Cambridge, Arlington, Lexington. I'm in Arlington.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's plenty cold there. Enough cold there for my taste, I would say.
Yeah. Well, so you're in Hartford. It's similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else was going through my mind. What was it? Oh, well, we're talking about how you deal with these different polarities. A moment after that, we also talked about how we're really glad that we have them in our lives. We have this love-hate relationship with the trials and tribulations of our lives. And I'm wondering what your opinion is on this. To what degree do you think that love-hate relationship is what helps keep us stuck in it?
Yeah. So I think in my experience and in like experience with people who I've worked with, especially around this idea of planning, I feel like what happens is, we can build like long-standing stories, which create stuckness, right? So it's like, I don't know, what's an example of one? I used to have a story that I could never finish anything, ironically, or that I always procrastinate because I'm creative. It's like this great thing. I'm creative, so I always procrastinate. And then we sort of like get attached to them and we create, I think, our own drama around them. And then I think we stop ourselves from taking action or moving forward. But one of the things that we do in our planner, and actually this was part of the process that day of the coffee cups, what happened was I was like, a line is being drawn in the sand. And I just remember looking up and like around the office and being like, does anyone know what you do when you want to get healthy? Cause I had sort of been like a yo-yo dieter, like but wasn't a good cook. Like I was like, what do I do? And someone was like, a yoga studio just opened. You should go to yoga. And at the time it was either like work or kids. Like I didn't think I should have a babysitter for going to yoga. But on this day I was like, all right, I'll listen to the people. And so I went to the yoga class, and actually the woman was like a law of attraction teacher. And, I'm also an introvert, but for whatever. And so usually I would go to a class and walk right out the door at the other end. But for some reason I was like, I got to meet this lady. So I went and I met her, and I was telling her like about the coffee cups and like wanting to be healthy. And then she was like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a web designer. She's like, okay, great. We need a website, and I know how to get you healthy. So just come to my house tomorrow. And I was like, all right, whatever. So it like, so it was like, it was just like it was like nothing could get in my way. So I'm telling you all this because what she told me the next day of how to get healthy the day before the coffee cups would have sounded pretty impossible. She wanted me to, like, here I was, like a mom of young children. I never did anything for myself. She wanted me to go to yoga every single day. She wanted me to go raw vegan. I had no idea how to eat or cook or do anything. And what was the third thing?
Wow.
I forget what the third thing was.
Shift. Raw vegan, that's a big shift.
I know. It was like a big shift.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I'll do. I mean, I think the third thing was like law of attraction stuff. I think she was like, she's like, state your goal and like say it in the present positive tense every day. So I was like, okay, whatever. But like, I actually followed through, and I wasn't a big follow througher. So I literally went raw vegan the next day, and it was quite enjoyable. The way I did it was I ate the same thing every day for like 4 months, because I just like, she gave me a menu of a day because she wasn't much of a cook either. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And so I did that. And then when I got sick of it, then I like Googled a class and I did the next thing, and I learned the next thing, and I ended up writing a cookbook eventually. But you know, like,
wow,
it was sort of like one thing led to the next. But I didn't let it get in the way. And I'm now totally diverting from the original question, which I don't even remember what it was, but it was something about, I'm like, wait, I had a point. I really had a point to this. I think it was about being attached. Yeah. So I wasn't like attached to what was happening. And one of the things that I did was, and this became our planning page. So I'm telling you all this because one of the things she told me to do was to go buy one of the books by Abraham, and I ordered it. And so I ordered like a tear off calendar instead by mistake. And so I was like, all right, I have this calendar. So what I started doing was I started reading the quote on the front, which was very lovely and always lifted my spirits. And then I'd flip it over and I'd turn it in half, and I'd write my goal in the present tense on one side. And then on the other side, I would say the 3 things I was going to do to move myself forward, and I'd choose what time I was going to do them. And that sort of became the basis of our planner because I felt like that really worked.
Interesting.
And so one of the practices I do when I get out of alignment still to this day, and I do with clients all the time, is that at the end of every day, so, you know, if you're planning and you're like blocking out your day and you're like, I'm going to go to the gym here and I'm going to do my work here and I'm going to like be with kids here, like whatever it is, like we don't get too granular. We're more like, these are the high level focuses we want. But then if at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I said I was going to like, I really said I wanted to be the kind of person who could, like write a blog post in an hour or whatever. And I just totally didn't even write it. And so then it's like, well, why? And it's like, oh, well, because I went to go find a title, and then I went on Instagram for an hour and I got totally lost. And then all of a sudden it was time to go pick up somebody from school. And so the practice of like every day, like noticing when you do what you say you're going to do and when you don't do what you say you're going to do, and really noticing like what's actually based on what you really want. Like for me, that was really helpful in detaching from the drama of it, because I felt like the drama was taking way more time than the actual like, oh, interesting, I did this instead of this. And then I can just sort of be lighter about it and move on to my next day and actually learn about my habits and my tendencies and like correct them and move forward in a different way. Whereas before I would just be like, oh, I guess I'm never going to be one who can write something fast. And as we know, then that makes it harder to write something fast.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're talking about the way that you operate. I think that we could all use more time just being conscious about why are we doing the things that we're doing from a place of love.
Yes.
You know, I've had lots of fancy calendars before where it was like every minute of every day, like every half an hour, and like very masculine. And I had, you know, like I had a very strong masculine side and a very weak weak feminine side. I didn't know
me too.
what that meant whatsoever. So like planning without that, like planning like that felt gross, and then I wouldn't get everything done, and then I'd beat myself up, and then that would spill over to the next day. But I would never ask that specific question on like, why? What came up that you didn't do it? You're not just like an a-hole or lazy, like you're smart, and you know, like you're a good person, Jody. Like, stop beating yourself up. Let's figure this out. That's so important.
I love that.
I love that.
Well, and I always like to think that planning in itself obviously is like a masculine tendency. And I had the same thing of like, I feel like we're all born, I think, in balance with masculine and feminine energy, and the world sort of skewed us all in a different direction. But when I found the other direction, and actually it was at a similar time when I started to like learn that I was in more control of my destiny. I let go, I think, of the structure of planning. And I got wishy-washy in a different way. Like I got it went too far the other way. And so I like to think of planning sort of as like, it's like a container, and it is a masculine energy that allows me to fully show up in all the feminine pieces. Cause it's like, it's contained in the day or in the month or whatever time frame I'm looking at. And that has been really helpful to just allow myself to have both those pieces in balance, which I think is really important in creating a balanced life.
Yeah, balance really drives the whole train. If you don't have balance, I don't care whether you're male or female. I don't care if you're masculine dominant or feminine dominant. If you're not in balance, forget it. It's not going to work. I mean, not that you can't survive, not that you can't thrive strongly oriented one way or the other, but if the balance isn't there, it's going to catch up.
I think that there's magic when you're working within that balance and drawing on like the strengths of both. Like for me, I just grew up in a very masculine business environment. So I really thought that I had to be super masculine and like go, go, go. And when I realized the toll it was taking on my health, I ignored it for a long time, and I was like, I can push through. I'm tough, and, I started to see my body fail, and I started to see, how I was like drudging along and hating my life. And, I went to hire a fitness coach because I was like, okay, I'm really good, Sunday through Friday, and I want you to like kick my ass. So I know if I talk to you on Sunday, then I won't mess up Friday, Saturday. Like I need somebody to, be there to punish me or whatever. And she asked me the most amazing questions, like, why do you do that? Because I'm so exhausted. I can't function come Friday night, Saturday. I can't even like muster up the energy to do anything to even feed myself. And she said, how does that make you feel looking at your life from that perspective, that you give it all away and you leave nothing for yourself? And it was like, oh, wow. Okay, smack me over the head. Thanks for that. But it's something that I couldn't see. And I think that a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah. And we would never like tell a good friend or a kid or a spouse, like, go, go, go until you have nothing left.
Right.
Then come back home. Like, we would never say that to anybody.
No.
This is really interesting because I'm thinking about an interview I did here on the show about, it was within the last couple of weeks. I don't remember exactly when it was. And it was a gentleman, he's in his late 20s. He leans very heavily on masculine type activity. He works out, at gym every single day, and he's got a whole crew of people that he coaches to, get up at 4 a.m. and go do your stuff and take action and blah, 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 all this other stuff. And it's working for him. He's been very successful. He's doing well. And yet the thought that kept going through my mind is, make a note to bring this guy back onto the show in about 10 years. Because I know if you can push yourself that way, especially when you're young. You can do that. You can do that for quite some time, but it does eventually catch up to you. If you don't find a way to balance, I remember early on, I had, like in my first year doing the podcast, it's always challenging because you're trying to figure out, well, what's my theme? Who am I going to be talking to? Am I going to be doing solo? Am I going to do it with guests, co-hosts, whatever it's going to be? And that first year I did a lot of interviews, and I was, of course, starting from scratch, and I was working with people outside of my very tiny network for good reason, because it was a tiny network. And I was pretty exhausted doing that. But one of the people that I interviewed, the gentleman, he was an Asian American. He was in his early 40s. And in his late 30s, after becoming a multimillionaire and dealing with all the pressures that a male Asian American goes through, because there are very, very strong expectations for people from an Asian background, he burned out. He burned out so severely that he actually had to sell his businesses. Wow. And for the first time in his life, he had to ask himself a question that he never asked him, which was along the lines of what we've been talking about here. What do you want? What do you want to do? And he said, if I hadn't asked that question, I don't remember exactly how I phrased it. My interpretation of what I remember is I'd be dead. I'd be in an institution, something along that line. Like it was that severe for him. I think that's actually a fairly common human experience. If you push really hard in one direction, you can get somewhere. You can produce results. You can be very successful, but you pay the piper at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that was my coffee cup day. I was about to pay, but I drew a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I came out of that line. I mean, you did a whole script flip on that line.
Yeah.
In 1 2-hour period. I mean, just bam.
Yeah. And it was interesting though, cause like, you know, it goes back to that idea of like all the wants and time. And I'm definitely not someone who, I mean, I definitely have worked on, flipping my wants into the positive versus like reflecting back on what I don't want too often. But, you know, that's been a work in progress. But one of the things, I just totally lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that? We were going to go toward, what were we just talking about?
Actually,
talking about how it takes control.
Oh, I know what it was. So I'd always wanted like really fast results, right? Like that was what I had been trained. Like that was my masculine. Like, how do I get this like really fast? And I always also had pretty strong desires. So I had strong desires and I wanted the results fast. And one of the magic things about that time was somewhere in all of it, I was like, whoa, maybe I need to be nicer to myself. And the truth is that the way I got unhealthy was because I've been working really hard while I had 3 pregnancies and nursed 3 children. And like, I was doing like 5 jobs at once. And that's why I'm depleted right now. So it took me 5 years to be in this place. At the time I had like 85 extra pounds on me and yada, yada. And I was taking all this medication. And so it was like, it had taken me 5 years though to get there. I wasn't like that before kids. I was like that now. And I was like, what if I just gave myself permission that it might take 5 years to get out of this predicament? And I remember thinking that, and actually that's what I wrote down a lot on a piece of paper, like 5 years in, 5 years out. Like I just kept thinking that. And for some reason, like I think sometimes we just need to find the thought that's going to actually help us take the next step. But that one really helped me. But the weird thing is that then everything happened in record time. So then it's like all of a sudden I changed things overnight, but a week later I was off of 2 medications that I didn't even know one didn't need to take. Like just so many things happened so quickly. And I tell people the weight melted off. I'm sure it took longer than a week for 85 pounds to melt off, but you know what I mean? Like but it just like the ease of it all with that thought was so, it definitely wasn't 5 years for all of it to come together. But I needed that thought in order to even give myself permission to take a step forward. Because otherwise, like with the thought of I want it tomorrow, I couldn't move.
It was too overwhelming.
It was too overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. That is such a profound thought. I know that I had something similar, you know, with health, you know, losing weight, you know, whatever. I remember being like, well, this is stupid. Like some app told me to weigh every day and I would do it. And like every, you know, other day it would be up and then down and then it was like, okay, I've lost like 5 pounds or whatever. And I remember having a similar moment where I was like, okay, let's run this through. You quit And by your birthday, because I made the commitment on my birthday that I just didn't want to carry around this extra weight. I wanted to lose it, and I wanted to be healthy, and I wanted to be in shape and whatever. I wanted to feel better about my body. So, okay, you're like 3 months in, 4 months in, and you've only lost like 7 pounds. Okay, you're upset with yourself, but you're going to quit, and then what? You're going to get to your birthday, and then what? Wish you didn't quit? Like, what? Why not just keep going? Like, it's okay. If it takes you years, so what? Like, you're going to get to that birthday, like, hopefully knock on wood, right? You're going to get to that birthday no matter what. So what do you want to be? Like, how do you want to be when you get there?
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a little bit closer. And I let go of that same thing that you were talking about, that connection or, attachment to. It's got to happen right now. And whatever. And that year went by so fast. It was like 18 months later. People were like, holy crap, you lost so much weight. And, whatever, right? It's been an 18-month journey, not 2 weeks. Thanks. But
what you guys are talking about reminds me, it actually perfectly describes why I gave up on deadlines. I used to be very deadline oriented, and it was really quite toxic. And once I finally gave up on deadlines, I could give up on, it has to happen tomorrow. Oh, it has to happen within a certain period of time. If it doesn't, my life's going to come to an end. Oh, no. Mm-hmm. And of course it didn't. But
that's a hard thing to get out of.
It is. Yeah.
And do you feel like you still did things in a timely manner, having given up deadlines?
Oh, God, yes. I'm ridiculously productive. The difference was now I'm ridiculously productive in a way that's more relaxed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like a pressure gasket has been released.
Yeah.
And it allows maybe oxygen to come into the system. I don't even know what I'm talking about here, but it feels like it takes the pressure off. Okay, it takes a year, it takes 5 years, it takes, whatever you put inside your head, and you give yourself that space, and then it's like, whoosh, everything happens lightning speed, or it feels like that time goes by so much faster.
Well, you call it oxygen, but I think that's not a bad metaphor, because I think it's literally energy.
Yeah.
You're letting the energy come in. If the energy comes in, guess what? You got energy. You can do stuff with it. It's when you're depleted, you can't do anything. Well, that is oxygen.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, one of the things that we're really good at is depriving ourselves of that energy or that oxygen.
Yeah. Which is why I do what I do. So we make time
That's right.
for the energy.
I've got another
I think it's really important.
Yeah. Okay. So something that often plays in my head, I don't have any kids yet. We're working on having a family, still in the practice phase, the funnest part, I think. But something that, like I live on a farm. There's always something to do on the farm. I run multiple different businesses. The farm is also a business. Like, that's number 3. We're now starting like a retreat venture space collaboration. Like, you nailed it. All the idea.
Yeah.
Taking on all of these things. And I feel like something that has been coming up that I've been working through is this creating space. Okay. And then this implanted program, whatever it is, of like, if I do that while my husband is at work or he's outside doing something or whatever, there's this perception, not from him because I've asked him, but this perception that I've put on myself of like, oh, you're lazy if you take that time. What would you recommend for somebody that's working on repatterning that or moving out of that to allow themselves to take more space in the way that you said?
Well, it's interesting. We were just talking about this on a coaching call earlier because somebody was wanting to grow something in their business. And I was like, I think you just need more time to like discern what the next thing is. And when I was thinking like about, different people I follow and businesses I follow, it's just like, I feel like the more successful a person is, if you're really paying attention to what they're doing with their time, there's so much more spaciousness for like creativity and discernment and making choices. And so I think we're just so programmed to operate in like busy manufacturing mode, which isn't even really how any of us are operating, but somehow we've like inherited, going to school from 8 to 3, working from 9 to 5, blah, 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 blah. Like we've inherited all these like ideas about how it's supposed to be. And that was so that like the right cogs would be in the right place. Like that has nothing to do with what we're doing. And, if what Walt says about energy is true, which I believe it is, then it's like what we really need to be spending time on is like making sure our energy is good. Because if our energy is not good, we can't make the right choices, sell the thing we want to sell, get people to come to our retreats, like maybe even make the cows listen to us. I don't know. But, like I just feel like, those animals are smart about our energy. So, I just feel like, and that takes, we don't often talk about the fact that takes time, but the truth is it does like technically take some time in our day to like be in a centered enough place where we're like focused on upgrading our energy. Yeah. And it's got like one of my teachers in our program uses this great example of a telephone. Like we're constantly putting our phone on the charger and it takes like, and then all of a sudden we like have it out and it's like downloading the upgrades. Like it takes a moment out of our day, but it's like constantly downloading upgrades and taking the time to do that. And it's sort of, I feel like it's kind of like our equivalent to that.
Yeah.
And I just imagine the more and more we do that, the more and more successful we're all going to be. And like, we'll know the right move to make in our many businesses, like all the things.
I love that visual. I think that's so incredibly powerful because it's true. I mean, you don't upgrade your phone eventually. Like they start taking away, or it feels like this anyway, they start taking away options. Like I could do that before, but now I can't because I haven't upgraded the stupid software.
Yes,
stupid software. But it's true. It's
because
just
it takes time, but then it works better. Like then it actually like does things. It does things that it can't do before we give it the time to upgrade it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
And we live in this weird world where this is not appreciated by the multitudes of people around us. So I think then it's hard to convince ourselves sometimes that, so that's true too. They're both true.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a great rabbit hole. I wish we had time to go down that one. That would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of things that our programming does not appreciate, but yeah. Oh man. Wish we had another hour.
Right?
We'll have to come back, Mia.
Too, but
so fun.
We'll draw us to a close at some point. So I guess I'll have to save that for another time. But Mia, before we let you go, tell people about, first of all, how do they reach out to you? How do they get a part of what you do? And you were telling us before we got going that you have some stuff going on your website. Tell us about that too.
Yeah, so our business is called Plan Simple. And so you can go to plansimple.com and we're plansimple.co on all the social medias. But the website's the best place to come. And on our website, we have a course that anyone can come take for free. And it's called From Overwhelm to Ease. And it's basically about this idea of how it's usually not the circumstances or our to-do lists that are creating either the overwhelm or ease, but more our thoughts and how we can use planning and just taking the time to work with our thoughts and feelings to create more ease and balance in our lives. So anyone can welcome to come take that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Really good. This has been a fun conversation.
Oh, thank you. I agree.
Do you agree with it?
Oh yeah, this is awesome. I feel as though this conversation is incredibly necessary for our society, the world that we live in, the change that we want to see in the world. And Mia, I think that, you're taking that quote and being the change in the world. And I think that is incredibly special and courageous because I know that it takes courage to step out from what you were doing before to what you're doing now. And, to see how everything just aligned for you. And maybe it wasn't perfect all along the journey, but to see where you are now and how calm and centered and, successful you are now, there's obviously the evidence. The proof is in the pudding here. And I really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, thank you. It was so fun being in you guys are great interviewers, so it's so fun to be here.
Thank you.
Well, Jody Lynn knows what comes next because this is the way I always wind up the shows. But I think you'll agree, Jody Lynn, this really applies today. And I think
Absolutely.
you know that. I like to make it a point with all the guests who come on, because I mean, every guest who comes on here is a giver, and that's why you're here. You're giving information, you're giving your experience and so forth. And we often don't get recognized for the help that we've given to people that we've never met and have never seen. You know, they saw us on a podcast, they read a book, they saw an article, something along that line. So they visited your website, they took your course. And you never really, sometimes you do, sometimes you find out. You know, they send you an email, maybe they actually end up doing some, coaching with you or something like that. But in many cases, we don't find out about it. And I think we need to pay more attention to that and give recognition for it. So on behalf of those many people that you've never met, that you've never seen, who you've been helping all these years and who you're continuing to help, thank you for what you've been doing, because you're making a big difference in this world.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful.
I like to wind it up that way.
I love it.
So thank you very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.